Okay, so just rubbing your hands together. And then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. There you are. Side. Part of your chest. Your belly. And finally, your legs. Sit back and feel your weight dropping back. And just see if you can remember not movements and details and so on and so forth, but just a general feeling of centering, settling, rooting, quieting, whatever label you put on this sort of experience of coming into the space that Tai Chi offers us. Because memory is an interesting thing, and memory affects the body quite subtly and quite profoundly. And so just giving yourself a chance to think, yeah, I'm coming to do Tai Chi now. This is how it feels like. This is what it can do. Is a trigger for those various processes that lead to that feeling to begin to start up. Gradually letting your thoughts settle into your body, aware of how it feels when you sit back in this way. Breathe in that feeling of opening, releasing in maybe your chest or areas that may have felt a bit tight or a bit stiff. And it's very much a beginning. You're not going to just click straight into sort of where you were at the end of the last class or whatever. The kind of movement into a space that you're becoming more familiar with, almost like, you know, if you put on an old pair of shoes or something like that, there's that sense of familiarity, and even if they're a bit stiff, you know they're going to soon soften up. And an awareness of detail, the technical side of the art, is a definite aid in that process, a definite part of how we arrive at that place. So in particular, of course, with Tai Chi, letting your weight drop down, but also aware that as you sit back like this, here you've still got those parallel lines from shoulders to hips, and then down towards the outside of your knees, and down further towards your ankles. Part of the sort of images that we lay on to the body to help us to orientate ourselves. So you bring your feet in and find that position in your chair. And remember, you're not stuck in this position. So, you know, you will see me move around. I'm probably going to come forwards a little bit today. But then what I might do halfway through the session or something, like if I feel my back starting to ache, I'm quite happy to move back. So, you know, it's not a test in that sense. It gives you this opportunity to settle in, to feel what's going on for you right now, and rather than thinking, well, I should be able to do this because I could do it yesterday or whatever, you're just thinking, well, where am I now, and how do I access this space? From a technical point of view, ideally about 2/3 of your weight in your hips and buttocks, and if possible, you know, that a little bit of that weight, about 1/3 of the weight of your body, flowing down through your legs and into your feet, and just sort of gently compressing your legs. And as you go forwards, and I'm exaggerating this now because it's quite a slight movement, but it's almost like if you can imagine if you were sitting in water and you kind of just leant into the water a little bit, there'll be a bit of pressure against your chest, against the front of your body, but also a bit of support. And sometimes we can start to feel that little bit of support coming up from the feet. And as I've said before, one way to identify that in the first instance is just to raise your heels. You can't hold them up for very long, your calves will get tight. So, oh yeah, once you've got an idea of it, you gently lower your heels and see if you can just feel a kind of echo of that. And then slowly turning your head. So we can see all the movements as ways of exploring that space, that inner landscape, that feeling. Some movements will work better than others for us from that point of view. And of course, some of the complex exercises, that's actually quite challenging, but that is also quite useful, even if you don't get those feelings when we're doing something like dragonfly skims the water, because you haven't quite got the detail of it. Doesn't mean to say that you're not benefiting from it, but starting simply. And then shoulders. And of course, the routines that we develop also relate to this idea of memory, because as they become more familiar, what we remember isn't just which move this is or which move comes next, but that process of the movements taking your awareness to different parts of your body, deeper into your body. And then going forwards. Hands down to your sides. Elbows slightly bent and winding around. When we do this, if I turn around, slightly awkward position for me, but so here, you can see how my hand starts, there's my hip. My hand starts slightly in front of my hip. It comes out and around, and it's slightly behind. It doesn't happen that often in Tai Chi, so there's a bit of an opening there. It's not right back there, because that would be a strain. So it comes around like that. There's nothing wrong, particularly in, sort of, in your own practice, with doing just one arm and giving yourself a chance to focus on that. And then winding around. And as our hands turn out, they're not going behind the shoulders, but as they turn out, there's a little bit of that same opening just here, where your arm meets your chest. And you feel a little bit of movement in the muscles, but it's a little bit more than just the muscles. That the other way. So for instance, there's a layer called the fascia. You've got the name of it then. The fascial layer right through the body is what we think of as the muscle skin. And it's a continual layer from feet to the top of your head and down to your fingers. Give your hands a shake. Yeah. And just rocking forwards and backwards. And there's various sort of like folds and pockets in the fascia. But overall, it used to be thought to be just almost a bit of a nuisance. But more recently, they've discovered that it does have a certain elasticity to it, not in the same way that muscles do, but it's there. So as you go forwards, for instance, the fascial layer in your back is gently extended out, and then it will contract. So it becomes part of the movement. And another discovery they've made about the fascial layer is that it actually shares some kind of properties with certain crystals. It can transmit things like electrical impulses and so on and so forth. So that means that affecting the fascial layer potentially affects through the whole of your body. Some people now say that the meridians, the energy channels that they use in acupuncture and Chinese medicine exist within the fascial layer, which is interesting. And then turn. Just one example of how we use more than just muscle in Tai Chi. Muscles are a factor, the skeleton is there. The movement itself forms not so much a layer, but a continual connection through the body. And turn the other way. And then around. So the energy system in Chinese medicine has certain points in it, the acupuncture points, that affect different parts of the body. It's quite a complex map of the body. But in general, what we really are talking about here is that anything that happens in one part of the body has its influence potentially right through the body. Go back the other way. Come back to the upright position. Think of this upright position, get a sense for it, and then just put my hand down, pull your knee up, raise your toes and push out, and try and do all of that without straining. You'll feel it in your lower back a little bit, but try not to sort of stiffen up in the shoulders. And then on the other side. There's a saying in Tai Chi that when one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is in motion. That clearly isn't literally true. I kind of reinterpret that, saying when one part of our body is in motion, the whole body is engaged in one way or another. The whole body is part of the movement, either by stabilizing parts of the body or by actually directly being involved in. So if you think about a balloon, for instance, if you had a balloon filled with air or water, if you pressed in on one side of the balloon, if you could somehow measure the pressure on the opposite side of the balloon, when you pressed in, you would recall a change there. And so this combination of different physical elements in the body, muscle, fascia, the skeleton, and so on, along with the actual movement that fills the body, means that there are, for instance, in acupuncture, there's an acupuncture point down here on the ankle that has quite an effect on the shoulders. And I've done acupressure, and I've known it to have quite a significant effect. I've pressed that point for people, and they fed back, they feel the tension in their shoulders draining away and things like that. It's quite interesting. And in that sense, Tai Chi is very much part of that same view, part of that same system. So now, fisherman cast a net. Any one movement in Tai Chi could stand up to quite a long process of practice and understanding, even one as simple as this. For instance, I said earlier that when we were winding the hands around, that when the hands go back, this area here just extends out. And the same thing happens here. As I go forwards, the hand is behind for a moment. And so part of what helps to bring your hand forwards is this area, this little sort of valley between the shoulder and the chest. As we go forwards, just extends out a little bit and then contracts in. And there are many other things that you may notice. Don't wait for me to tell you what's going on in your body. It's just this calmer mind, observing changes in the movements. You'll find out things that I haven't even noticed. And then coming over. And sit back. Pigeon spreads its wings. And again, that very subtle opening and closing. The hands don't go behind your body on this one, but it means that part of what adds to the flow of the movement and the strength of the movement is what's happening here in your rib cage. Think of your rib cage as being like a folding door, opening and closing around the sternum. And this thing, in terms of as you go forward, it's like you're squeezing on a ball. So not only do we get the flow, but we start to get this stronger quality, very subtle conditioning of the body, like doing weights or something like that, which there's nothing wrong with, incidentally. But also a stronger feeling in the movement itself, in the energy that begins to build. and then pressing forwards. There's a similar thing happening here because you don't want your elbows to go behind your shoulders. If I exaggerate, this will come out here. So as I go forward, it's like I'm squeezing the elbows in to do that. That was very exaggerated, but again, it means that as well as the forwards and backwards movement, the weight, as well as the movement of your back, all of this is being supplemented by very subtle changes. We don't have to make that happen. We just want to observe it, because noticing these things seems to bring them into the light a little bit, to make them more effective. And then your hands fisted. Turn your hands out. Fingers in and expanding, contracting. And in the process of expanding, don't just be aware of the upward movement, but also if you think of this area as being like at the center of the expansion, again, as though there was a balloon there, and that balloon expanding in all directions. So there's a downward movement as well, which you want to try and feel in your hips, down through into your legs and your feet. That's quite a significant point, and an important thing to notice, that if we want to push out, up or to the sides or whatever, there's at one and the same time this downward movement that keeps us connected to the ground, keeps us rooted. And then change. Once more. Parting the clouds. Good now. Changing. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So that downward movement both helps to provide the power, the energy to move through the upper body, and also ensures that we don't overextend. There's always the risk when we do that of straining, or even if you think about what you're doing here, I'm sure we've all had the experience where you go to put something up on a shelf and you feel a bit kind of wobbly as you reach up. And those are clearly quite sort of tricky moments for us. One more time on each side. And then changing. Each movement will send that sense of pressure, that sense of movement through different pathways through your body. But the overall feeling should be of that movement being very flowing and harmonious, and as I said, strengthening. And not just the movement, but a harmony and a strengthening between these three elements that we work with, sometimes referred to as the three jewels or the three treasures, which is the movement itself, the energy, our body, of course, and our mind. It's really the coming together of those things, the harmonizing, the blending of those three jewels that gives us this notion of the chi. And then adding the turn. around. One foot out, scooping the sea, and look at the sky. Feeling your hips drop back, head and shoulders coming up nice and smoothly. There's a little bit of a stretch with this one, of course. Don't feel it's a competition to reach your feet. Just go as far as you're comfortable. Feel that slight pull in your back and the back of your leg. But making sure that it's not tense, it's not stiffened up. Think of that line that you can feel through your back and your leg, almost like almost like a guitar string that's tuned on the guitar. So it's extended out, but not rigid. And then grasping the tiger's ears. It's not a dragon at all. And switching sides. And then grasping the tiger's ears. One more. And then. So I was talking about that idea of the movement and the three treasures and so on and so forth. These are concepts that we find in Tai Chi, but also in Chinese medicine. And one of the aims, perhaps arguably the fundamental aim in Chinese medicine is to restore and cultivate this flow and the harmonization, the strengthening of the energy and the qi. Any kind of problem with our health, any kind of lack of well-being, in be it physical or mental or combination or whatever, is somehow associated, if not necessarily caused by initially. Obviously, a broken arm isn't necessarily caused by a deficiency in the energy, but it will be associated with a disruption in in that flow. So Chinese medicine, this is acupuncture and their herbal systems and massage and acupressure and so on, aims to restore that flow. When I was training in Chinese massage and acupressure, sometimes our teacher would say to us, if we were trying to, could we do a particular technique this way? Sometimes they'd say, no, you can't because of this. But sometimes they'd just say, they just ask us two questions. He said, you know, is it safe for the patient? And does it move the energy? And if the answer to both of those is yes, then it's a good technique. So, well, obviously, Chinese medicine, as I say, is very, very complex, very highly developed science in its own terms. But underlying the technical side of it is this very simple idea, and very much sort of found in Tai Chi and Qigong, the exercises that we're doing. Now, just rocking your weight forwards and backwards, just to remember this particular movement. So when we do this, we want to be able to feel that, for instance, our spine and our ribs are supported by the rest of our body, but not held tight. So supported in the way that a plant in water is supported by the density of the water. And if you had say an aquarium tank full of water and a plant in it, then you could get it to move with very little effort. You could even tap the side of the glass and create this slight vibration, this wave that would just move the plant a little bit. And if you can just apply that kind of idea to, say, just getting your spine to move a little bit, then, like all waves, gradually the movement builds, and these connections that I was talking about, to the shoulder and the chest, and all sorts of other things that we notice, are all part of that wave building through the body. But the initial movement, the initial effort, is relatively small. Another saying we have in Tai Chi is that 4 ounces will move 1,000 pounds. So once we've got that sense of connection, that sense of flow through the body, relatively small amount of effort in the right place at the right time can have quite a profound impact. Now this time going into this leg and just turning a little bit as though you're pushing with the shoulder. I am exaggerating this as always. It's this. Again, I could show you from the side, maybe it's clearer there. I go forwards and I turn, you see how my shoulder's like I'm pushing against something with my shoulder. Excuse me. So that turns your body. Try on the other side. You may even notice as you do this, the hands start sliding around. Then dropping your hands down as you would do for a fisherman cast a net, go forwards and just let the movement swing your arms out. Coming back to the middle, forwards. The combination of the transfer of your weight and all the rest of those little movements building through the body, and the rhythm expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting, gently moves your arms. So wind blows the willows. And of course the image of the willow tree, very charming one. So we want to try and maintain all those qualities. It's quite difficult. We want to still feel that our weight is sinking down, Our body's very soft, connected. We're trying to do it in the midst, as it were, of something that can be quite confusing. Especially, oh, what do I do with my arms now? It can start to go wrong if you're not careful. I always think that when this happens in Tai Chi, it's a bit like everyday life, really. All these things are fine in theory, but in practice, life is not that simple, and things go wrong, and things happen, and stresses occur, and so on and so forth. So it's good practice to try and keep that calmness, that centered quality, that smoothness of movement in the midst of something that is actually quite difficult. So you can probably do that now. So we'll make it a bit more difficult. And we're going to make the transition into Dragonfly Skims the Water. We'll do it in stages, as always. You go forwards and you turn, and you just raise the knee, the foot that you're turning towards. Excuse me. Remember, when you move the leg, we don't want it to disrupt what's happening in the upper body. I've got a dreadful tickle in my throat. I'm sorry about this. Then, what we're going to do, you raise the heel and the toes so the foot is off the floor. If this is causing you to strain, then I'll suggest you go back to just raising the heel. Give yourself time. It's quite strong, and you will need to practice to condition your body to do this. So go carefully. If you're okay with this, then we raise and rotate. So it's like you're kicking with the inside of your leg, kicking a ball up. And this is the full movement. Dragonfly skims the water. So you notice I'm trying to stay upright, not lean over. One more time on each side. And then, just to, as it were, come back to something to reset your mind into that calm feeling. Something simpler, circling ball. And then back the other way. And rest. So Dragonfly Skims the Water is quite a complex exercise. It's a good exercise to try and practice. As I say, even if you don't feel that it's kind of flowing or whatever, the effort that you're making can have dividends. In the end, this needs to be a useful art to us. It's one thing to sit in a nice comfy chair and do fancy movements, and it's lovely to do that. It's great to do that. But the real benefit is, you know, when we're walking to the shops and we sort of slip on the pavement or something like that. And if you can do this and work towards maintaining your roots, still sinking down in the chair, that's the thing that can really help you. So, you know, don't think that you're failing if you're not picking up the exercise. So now, once again, rubbing your hands together, tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. One shoulder. The other side. Upper part of your chest. Belly. And relax. Good. And stand. So that idea that I presented earlier, that when we move, there's actually movement in all directions. There's always a counter movement. Is a very important one in Tai Chi. It's one that is actually very natural to us. So this is not some kind of strange foreign concept, if you like. When we walk along the road, actually what we do is we do lean forwards a little bit, but we push down into the ground to go forwards. So once again, it's very much a natural function that we're trying to be, that we're trying to do with the sense of awareness that we're actually doing it. And that becomes quite tricky. We don't want to make it happen because our body's doing it anyway. But we want to be aware of it, and just sort of, the term we would use in Tai Chi, the term that I like to use, is that we cultivate these things. So, sinking down, and your feet push down, and you expand in the upper body. Another thing to take note of is, as we do this, what's happening in your hips. So even as I push up, there's a feeling that my hips are being pulled down. So they don't just shoot up, they're moving against something, and then eventually they get taken over by the downward movement and pulled down. It's almost like there's a bit of elastic from my hip down to my foot. And I'm stretching out that elastic and then letting it contract again. Think of a guitar string. You don't want to overstretch. So even in the act of pushing up, the feeling of coming back to that root, to that more grounded feeling, is there in the movement. So rather than thinking that you have to somehow contrive or force yourself to root down, see if you can cultivate a feeling that you're allowing yourself to root down. And of course, what I'm really talking about is the pull of gravity. If you throw a ball up in the air, the momentum of the upward movement is gradually balanced and taken over by the downward movement of the pull of gravity. And then the opposite way around, of course. So we're moving between these two poles, these two opposites. with a nice, smooth, harmonious feeling. And really all we have to do is to make sure that we don't go too far in the other direction. And then parting the clouds. Check out. Now, put one foot forwards and just grab a drink. So, one foot in front. And the same thing here. We go forwards and we reach a point of fullness, beyond which it would be a strain. And then we just allow the leg to expand and to push us back, and the same thing happens there. And we learn to judge how far we can go in any particular direction before we cross that line. That means that we're starting to stiffen, we're starting to strain. We want that line to move out, we want to expand, but I think, as I may have said the other day, it's a bit like blowing into a bubble. You do so very carefully and gradually. On the other side. And then, once again, fisherman cast net. Remember that feeling of the spine, your ribs floating slightly, and how little effort it takes to just get a little bit of movement. So that little bit of a push up from the ground is all it takes to initiate a movement. Provided we've got the alignment of the body, allowing those connections, allowing the free flow of movement. So that's where a lot of the effort goes into maintaining and cultivating those qualities within the body. One more time. Change over. And back to your chair. I started off by talking about memory, the memory of feeling and so on and so forth. This is very important as we become more familiar with these ideas. And I was given a very sort of like graphic example of that when I used to teach in an establishment for people with head injuries. And one guy came up to me, and he'd only actually been to a couple of the Tai Chi sessions, but he said one of the symptoms of his head injury was that he would get panic attacks very easily. And he said that he was down in Cambridge, and he was in the centre of Cambridge by the bus station. And it was on a Saturday, it was very crowded and everything like that, and he could feel a panic attack coming on. He recognised the signs. And he said he remembered how he felt in the Tai Chi session. You know, that sense of being relaxed or calm, however you care to label it. And he said that memory reminded him that it was possible to feel like that. And what he did then was, rather than have to experience the panic attack, he went into the little park that's behind the bus station, found a bench, sat down, and just sort of sat comfortably and did some breathing and so on, so slow breathing and so on, so forth. And he said the panic attack just disappeared. And it was the memory of that feeling, the memory that that is possible, which can so easily get lost. You know, if you're up to your neck in details, and you know, you're in a rush and so on and so forth, try and remember what it's like to be sort of calm and still. And perhaps in particular, I kind of feel with this last exercise, embrace tiger, return to mountain, that idea of a return to something. The mountain is this symbol of calmness and stillness and strength and so on and so forth. See if there's something in this, a particular sensation in your body, a particular image, an idea, a quality of movement even, or whatever. I'm not going to tell you what it should be, but are there one or two things that you could identify that are the things, you know, kind of like when you're standing in the supermarket queue or you're rushing for the bus or whatever it is, are there things that you would want to remember, the trigger to, oh yes, there is a calmness, there is the potential for that stillness there. See if you can find something like that in the exercise. So just embrace tiger, return to mountain. One more time. And rest. And nice. Once again, thank you very much, everybody. So take care of yourselves and when you enjoy some of the sunny weather when we get a chance. But if you really want to practice your rooting down, by the way, when the storm arrives, as it's due to over the weekend, I think, at some point, the strong winds, go out in the strong wind and see if you be careful.
Yes.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Take care, all of you.